Welcome everyone to a new video idea, which I hope becomes the start of a new series. I'm going to start off this weird challenge series with a little indie game that's about to receive a new update, Empires of the Undergrowth. Now, to get some information about the game, it's basically an RTS where you control an ant colony. And you basically do what ants do. They build colonies, forage for food, kill other insects, collect more food, grow bigger, etc, etc. But today's challenge is not going to be completing the game as of the pre-Fire Ant update, but to do so under a set of, shall we say, conditions. First off, I'm going to be using the insane difficulty settings of the player-controlled colony that you fight against in the extra mode, The Other Foot. When you play this mode on insane difficulty, you face off against the primary colony, or the player-controlled colony. They have the same ants you get access to, but they use a specific set of ants with specific abilities, and they have a preset layout for their colony/nest. Now, I could just use one of my other colonies that I have already done to do this challenge, but I chose to create a fresh colony, a fresh start, and so we begin the epic journey to create an insane difficulty accurate primary colony.
I see the Queen has taken well to her new home.
It's fascinating. She has already started to spawn. Incredible, really, that we found such a healthy specimen.
How long until we can expect to see interspecies polymorphism?
We should be patient and allow the colony to grow first. I've placed food nearby. Then we will introduce the Formica and observe their reaction.
Excellent. Keep me updated on their progress.
From humble beginnings, we start with our queen, the scientists, and a measly trio of workers. The start of a great empire in the making. There are some interesting lines you can hear if you choose to just sit there and do nothing, but until you actually unlock some ants, you only have access to the humble workers of your colony. Your colony is known as Formica Ereptor, or gene thieves. A species of ant that are capable of adapting other species of ants into its own, allowing multiple species to coexist in a single colony. But we can't unlock them yet. We must acquire them through the campaign missions. Our first species, the black ants.
They're beginning to expand their territory.
Excellent news.
This Formica Ereptor Queen has set up home beneath a rotting log. She is fat and vulnerable. Her first brood will need to move quickly if the colony is to survive. Their priority now is to find food, and there is plenty around. But there are other hungry creatures down here. The workers will need to be vigilant.
Playing as Formica Ereptor, the black ants, we live beneath a rotten log in the dirt. Our first mission is to establish the beginnings of our empire by expanding our territory and killing all the nearby creatures. However, I must be careful. Pick the wrong area to excavate and I will encounter enemies. Pick the wrong enemy and I could be overwhelmed and eaten. One of the best ways to improve my chances of victory here is to upgrade my soldiers and workers to higher levels. With higher levels, they get more health and deal more damage and get special benefits. For Formica Ereptor, their warriors not only gain more health and deal more damage when upgraded, they also attack faster. After clearing the area, we achieve victory and move on.
This Formica Ereptor colony has now established itself as a rising power in the undergrowth. Soon their territory will need to expand above ground, where new challenges await. For the time being, however, the Queen is safe. This Formica Fusca Black Ant Queen has given birth to her first brood. While the workers establish their new territory in the earth, above ground, a nearby colony of Formica sanguinea slave maker ants are on the lookout for would-be victims. These ants specialize in stealing larvae from neighboring nests and raising them as their own. If the black ant colony isn't prepared for the inevitable incursion, they may be wiped out entirely.
In our next mission, we encounter Formica sanguinea, slave maker ants. Unlike Fuscas, sanguinea do not just attack other colonies. They capture larvae of rival colonies to raise them as their own. In this mission, we must build our empire and do so with the constant attack of sanguinea raids. At the same time, as we excavate further into the dirt, we encounter spiders, funnel web spiders to be precise, who set up traps to kill ants and other small creatures. After we've endured the waves of sanguinea and survived their final onslaught, we end the mission with a victory.
Colony seeks once again to bolster its numbers. A battalion of slave makers charge into the nest. Once again, the slave makers return to their nest with new black ant larvae to raise as their own. The raids will continue, but this Formica Fusca colony has proved its capacity to endure and grow. Eventually they will surpass their parasitic overseers, and the continued raids of the slave makers will reduce to nothing more than a mere inconvenience for the great Black Ant Empire.
Is it feeding time already?
Yes, our queen is insatiable.
After completing the second mission, we can purchase the Black Ant and upgrades for it. For now, we only need to get level 2 and 3 upgrades, because we intend to complete the Formica challenges on insane difficulty. For upgrades to our ants, and for the challenge, we are going to be getting many defensive upgrades to make our Black Ants absorb more damage while healing themselves out of combat. Before I take on the challenge, I do the missions again, but with additional challenges to earn additional rewards, food and jelly. Once ready, we begin the challenge.
I think it is time we connected the outworld to the feeder colonies. I want to see how these Ereptors respond under pressure.
I will prepare the experiment.
Let's begin with a small threat.
Connecting the Fusca colony now. I will let 10 through to start with. The Ereptors identified the threat and responded very quickly.
Excellent. Let's see how they handle a few more, shall we?
Introducing 20 Formica Fusca ants.
The first challenge is not too difficult. The lady scientist tests my abilities, and soon after she leaves, leaving me and the fate of our colony to our mortal nemesis, the male scientist.
I wonder how they will react to a rival Ereptor colony. Introducing 40 rival Ereptor ants.
Disregarding our safety, he unleashes ever-increasing numbers of ants. At some point, we must endure an unending tide of ants, and eventually beetles attacking us. Should we survive, the rewards are ours.
His ability to withstand such overwhelming assaults is incredible. I wonder, how will they handle a sustained flow of aggressors?
How has the colony been responding?
They mounted an excellent defense against 20, 25, and even 30 Fusca ants, as you suggested.
Perfect. Perhaps we can provide more of a challenge for them next time.
What a fantastic suggestion!
Let's see how the colony grows over the next few days.
Now that they have experienced battle, I expect to see a significant rise in the number of soldiers.
Now, we move on to the Rufa colonies, known as Formica rufa, or more commonly known as the wood ants.
This Formica rufa wood ant queen has laid her first brood in a burrow near the sea. Her nest is just on the outskirts of the beach, the perfect vantage point for scavenging hapless morsels washed in by the tide. At the moment, the tide is out, but it won't stay that way. The ants must make haste and stockpile what they can, while they can.
Unlike Fusca, Rufa used two types of soldiers, Rufa melee and Rufa range. The melee soldiers are just blocks of health, meant to absorb damage while protecting the real damage dealers, the ranged soldiers. The ranged soldiers come in two categories, mortar and rapid. Rapid fire soldiers deal low damage at faster intervals, while the mortar deals heavier damage at slower rates. For the missions, we will be using the rapid fire ants. My first mission is simply to survive several nights with increasingly dangerous enemies. The water levels rise accordingly each night. But during the day, there is tons of food to be had on the areas which become flooded. The tricky part? There is no safe area to harvest. We will have to invest ants to gather the food. Tiger beetles, hermit crabs, and wolf spiders will plague me and my colony. However, with numbers and upgrades, the threat they pose becomes less and less as time passes on.
A number of small Formica rufa and Fusca colonies have established themselves on this beach. Those nearest to the water's edge have enjoyed the first pick of the washed-up seafood for the past few days. However, as the sun and moon near alignment and the first spring tide of the month approaches, high tide draws nearer to these intrepid ants. Seemingly aware of their circumstances, these colonies are preparing to relocate to higher ground. There is only one way up the bank, and the route is currently occupied by a small Rufa colony. These defenders will have to hold their ground against the oncoming siege. It will be 3 days before the high tide washes away the competition. If the colony survives, it will inherit the beach. But this won't be an easy fight.
The second mission, I am tasked with holding the high ground with my small colony against two already established empires belonging to Rufa and Fusca that are on the lower ground. They've gotten first pick of the food washed up by the water, including several large and very delicious looking fish with tons of food. With the rising water levels, access to this food becomes impossible, making this a very limited resource for all colonies. Getting access to this food is impossible for us, but we do have access to a much closer and more readily available resource, aphids. These aphids inhabit patches of plant life and will continually secrete honeydew for us to collect. Provided I protect them, my high ground colony will have a continuous supply of food.
Although the nests near
Unfortunately, the aphid's natural predator, ladybugs, know where they graze and will continue to attack and eat them. The more we lose, the less food we'll be able to harvest. At the same time as we harvest food, the lower ground colonies will launch ever-increasingly desperate attacks against us, sending waves of soldiers to clear us out and kill my colony off for them to evacuate. With a supply of food from the aphids, I can gather enough numbers to push them away until night falls. When night comes, the ladybugs and other nighttime critters begin their attacks now. While the ladybugs attack and eat my aphids, the other bugs attack and try to dissuade me from trying to keep them safe. I am given two choices: preserve my forces and food level I've gotten during the day by hiding away at night at the cost of losing aphids, or fight to protect them and risk losing my forces. I have no choice but to protect them. Without their continuous food supply, I will not be able to hold the line. Throughout the nights, the number of ants I'm losing increases, but as I trade during the night, I gain almost as much, if not more, food than what I spend to protect my aphids. On the final day, the lower ground colonies will launch an all-out desperate assault before the water levels rise and drown them. They empty their entire colonies and even the queens charge up. By holding the entrance to my colony, I'm able to protect my territory and claim victory for my empire.
The day is almost over. The low ground is already starting to flood. The lower ground nests are emptying completely, and the ants are rushing up the bank. This is their final assault. The battle has begun. The wood ants upon the hill have finally defeated their would-be successors. Tomorrow their empire will expand to the undefended intertidal flats below, commanding both the aphid farms and the bounty of the sea. This colony will rise to become an undeniable power in the undergrowth.
Back with my Ereptors, I do some additional challenge missions to earn more food and jelly, and then I begin buying the wood ants. For the challenge, we're using mortars. At level 3, these ants gain a splash damage ability. I purchased a few, allowing me to have 2 full sets of both black and wood ant respectively. And after stockpiling a massive supply of food, I take on the challenge.
The Ereptor workers have raised their first Formica Ereptor ant.
Incredible! I wasn't sure it was even possible. The colony seems to have made significant progress. Perhaps it is time we began Phase 2 of the trial.
Agreed. I will prepare the feeder colonies.
Let's ease them in with a familiar disturbance. Introduce 20 Formica Fusca ants.
The Fusca colony is attached, and the ants are on their way.
Once again, the lady scientist keeps her partner in check. much, not letting him go ham. But after she's gone, my colony is at his mercy once again. He performs the usual tests, sending ever-increasing waves of ants, from not only Fusca, but also Rufa and Ereptor. Soon enough, all 3 colonies are attacking me, and I must now hold my entrance.
I wonder how long they will survive against a sustained flow from all 3 colonies. Let's see.
The battle intensifies as the scientist releases tiger beetles and then eventually multiple wolf spiders who rush my queen and other areas of my colony. Fortunately, I purchased an upgrade to make my queen rapidly produce eggs and protect herself from harm for a brief period of time. This final burst gives me enough to survive the onslaught.
Yes! Victory to the Ereptor!
What's going on here?
Yes, the ants performed excellently against the Rufa. They just staved off an attack from 40 Rufa ants.
40? I think that's enough for now. We don't want to overstress them.
Agreed.
Continue to watch over the Formicarium. Additional experiments will be on hold for the time being.
I understand. No more tests.
Unfortunately, as much as we love our colony, we must move on. So, with a final goodbye to all of our resources and our layout, we are moved into our new home.
The Counterpart Colony has been delivered. We need to commence preparation for the final experiment. After that, we can dispose of the specimens and close the project. You should begin transplanting our Ereptors into the modular Formicarium, and be careful with the Queen.
Yes, I know how to use a trowel.
Ugh.
Close the project? Bah! Did you hear that? Final experiment, my foot! I'm in charge of the colony, and I will decide when we've finished testing. There. All set in your new home. Grow quickly, my little ants. We have lots of work to do.
Here I am, at last. The setting of our challenge. But before I can get started, we need food, we need space to dig, and our next soldier line, the Atacephaletus soldiers, or more commonly known as the Leafcutter Majors. My first mission with the Leafcutters was a slow grinding trudge, a race against a rival Atacephaletus colony to see which one can become master of the area by harvesting more leaves.
This young queen has successfully raised her first daughters beneath the leaf litter of the rainforest floor. The nutritious fungus she fed them as larvae is now dwindling. If they don't find food quickly, they will all starve. The juicy grubs nearby are a staple meal for many underground opportunists. But for now at least, they will go ignored. This budding Atacephalotis leafcutter colony has only one viable source of food, and it must be collected above ground.
Now, unlike the other colonies, Atacephaletas do not eat other insects or creatures. Instead, they eat leaves, cutting them up and turning them into a fungus, which they then can digest. The process is slow, and they are extremely complex in terms of what they have going on. They have 4 castes or subspecies of ants, starting with minims, who collect leaves and process them into fungus and transport waste to get rid of it. They have the standard workers, then a hybrid worker and soldier, and finally, the mater, the biggest and heaviest hitting and tankiest ant available.
The leaf cutters have raised their first
No matter what time
major
of day it
ant.
is, night or
Its
day, I
swollen head
cannot
is filled
stop
with
collecting
muscle to
food.
power its
The
crushing jaws.
colony has a
Few
massive
stand
head
against
start,
it in combat and
only
escape
by
unscathed.
continuously producing workers and
champion
soldiers
warrior will
and
make
keeping a
final
constant
addition
stream of
to the
materials
colony.
coming in do I catch up.
With their
As I begin to
demise at hand,
overtake
they
and
have
retake
no
my
choice
goal,
but to strike back at
the
their
other
opponent.
colony launches a desperate raid to kill me, but by this point it is too late. After beating it back, I gather the last of my leaves and claim victory. You can win by killing the other colony, but it is very difficult to launch a successful assault against their heavily entrenched position.
The ants have subdued their rivals and achieved dominion over the clearing. As the competition withers, they will extend their territory in all directions, firmly establishing their agricultural empire. One day this colony will number in the millions.
Come on now, my little ants. You need space to grow. Dig, dig, dig!
I'm sorry, what was that?
I wasn't talking to you.
In my next mission, I take on the scariest enemy in the entire game, Esteton Berkeley, also known as the Army Ants, the most feared ant species in the world. Those species that know of them flee at the sight of their scavenging lines. Those that do not wish they did.
This small leafcutter colony has established a foothold in a clearing near the base of a tree. Their location provides prime access to lucrative harvesting grounds which have gone unchallenged for the past few weeks. However, unbeknownst to the ants, the peace is about to be broken. A scourge is drawing in. It will be here by morning.
Unfortunately, I cannot leave,
Several
but I
meters
can
south of the
beat them
nest,
away.
a leaf-
As the mission progresses and time passes, the foraging line of the army ant grows closer and closer to my colony. Soon I am under direct assault, but by continuously growing, harvesting, upgrading, and building my force, I can weather the storm and slowly push the army
The
ants
swarm
back.
frontier is expanding towards the leafcutter nest.
During the night is when it's safest for me to harvest leaves, and once I'm sufficiently prepared, I use all of my colony's might, workers, and soldiers to fight the horde. There are several creatures I have to be aware of. Whip spiders that roam the lane during the night specifically. Even an adult whip spider that controls the entire center area. But with numbers, it eventually falls. And with enough time and patience, victory is granted to me as the army ants finally have had enough of dealing with me.
Against impossible odds, the soldiers of the Atta stronghold met the tyrannical intruders with ferocious defiance time and time again. Unable to break their lines and after tremendous losses, the army ant swarm has finally elected to move on. For the leafcutters, the ultimate trial is over.
With my knowledge of how the mages work, I go from using stun mages to taunt mages. The reason for this is because of their defensive aura abilities and their ability to draw in attacks onto themselves to protect other ants nearby. With additional upgrades to improve how much damage they can resist, now comes the part of the challenge that is trickiest. Getting the correct layout. Something I need to complete the other foot, which I'll do now. Bye-bye. Now that I've done the mission, and after much effort, I finally learned how the primary colony is laid out, what its army composition is, and finally, the upgrades. At least I hope. After much effort, I've laid out my colony and excavated it. So we will end this video with the layout of the colony before I begin the work of planting my ants and then upgrading them. I will need to complete additional missions to amass the food to actually achieve the army composition I require for my challenge, and to amass a stockpile of food for the challenge to come. Tune in next time when I put my insane difficulty primary colony to the test against the insane difficulty of the Counterpart Colony. See you next time! Bye-bye!
The new challenger has entered the arena.